Okay, so we're going to get started. Welcome to today's Women's Collective Summit Office Hour. So my name is Danielle Moon. I'm the Director of Programs and Community Engagement. So Women's Collective Summit is something we just started this year, and this is our fourth and final office hour, talking with experts and professionals and, in advancing women in public service. So today we have Johanna Silva Waki with us today. She's with Emily's List. She's the Vice President of Training and Community Engagement. And she's done a lot of work to help women run, obviously, for Emily's List mission, helping more women run and seek office across the country. So we'll just start off with brief introductions by you, if that's okay.
Yes, no, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Danielle, for that. And to APAICS for having Emily's List be part of this Women's Collective series. We certainly appreciate the partnership that we have with all of you throughout the years. Again, my name is Johanna Silva Waki, and I am the Vice President for Training and Community Engagement at Emily's List. And our work in our department is to really diversify and increase and expand the pipeline of women running for office. We are the largest resource for women at all levels of office who are thinking about running and who are currently running, or for women who want to help other women who are running for office. I actually got my start in politics when I was a student at San Francisco State. I'm actually a Californian, a San Franciscan via Central America. I actually immigrated here with my family in 1981, and we were fleeing a civil war at the time. I think, one of the things that brings me so much strength in my work and perspective is my immigrant experience. And as an immigrant going through school in California in a time that was, very different than what it is today, there were a lot of anti-immigrant, anti-student legislation that was happening. And really, I felt that I could not stay on the sidelines and let this happen to certainly me, but my community. And I really became active in organizing, student organizing, community organizing, and that led to me doing campaign work. I think oftentimes we always think about, how do you get into this work? Because there is no major, there's no pathway, so to speak, but really it's about finding where your strengths are and how all of these skills around organizing, a community engagement, really transfer into politics, but certainly public service. And so I'm very fortunate to be here at Emily's List now for the last 6 years. I actually started as part of the Western Regional Director, where I ran and advised candidates throughout the Western region, many of them obviously very diverse candidates, since we're fortunate in the West in particular to have such a plethora of diverse candidates and certainly women. So I'm looking forward to this conversation and seeing where we certainly can be helpful to you all as you're making your decisions to run for office. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I really want to echo what you said earlier about, learning how to run campaigns or even work in campaigns. I mean, I studied political science in undergraduate, and you don't really learn about what campaigns are like. These are really just experience that you learn, through being part of a campaign. And so I think it's so important that, we continue these conversation, and especially inspiring younger people, younger generations. And, and today's topic is, running as an immigrant woman. When you're first immigrating to a country, there's so many things that you have to learn. And, part of it is civic engagement and participating in your civic duties. So with that, I just want to start off with the broad question. So obviously, we're focused on uplifting API women. And so I just wanted to start off by asking, what advice would you have for API women who are running for office? We're seeing a very positive, great trend of more API women running for office at a higher rate than usual. So I think it's important to hear from experts like yourself to see how we can best prepare for those who are thinking about running.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. And I think, the big thing, the big advice is run. One of the things that we always get asked, or I always get asked, is, am I qualified to run? Have I spent enough time in my community? Do I have the right degree? Do I have the right contacts? Maybe I need to learn more about, let's say, climate policy, or I need to learn more about a particular policy. And so I don't feel ready to run. For Emily's List, we know that your lived experiences are what qualify you to run for office. And what that means is that we know that, we want to make sure that women who have, again, bring their immigrant experience, who better to understand how important it is to be part of a community, what resources are needed from a community so that you feel that you have support, right? How does that connect to housing issues? How does that connect to issues of healthcare and access to healthcare? And so really it's about bringing your experiences to the table so that you have a diverse perspective on what other constituencies perhaps, will also care about. I think that's number one. I think that the big thing is that we need more diverse voices. You mentioned this, and certainly the perspective of AAPI women is very much needed. While there are many that are running, there's still a lot representation that needs to happen. Here in California alone, we only have 2 women in the state legislature who are of AAPI heritage. And so I think for us, there's still a lot of work to do even in the state to try and encourage, to try and support. But I think the other piece of this is also to recognize that the community is not monolith. The community is extremely diverse. And so again, bringing those diverse experiences, those diverse lived experiences is very key to running. I think the other piece is, if you are thinking about running for office, try and help a woman that is running in your community, and use that person as an example of what they're doing. So you could shadow them, you can support them, throw an event for them, volunteer for them, really get a sense of what a campaign looks like, right? It's one thing to say, I want to run for office, but until you're really in it, it's important for you to get an understanding. I think seek mentorship too. Mentorship from anyone here, right? That is certainly part of APEX. Your colleagues that are in the political world. I think mentorships are key. They certainly were helpful to me as an immigrant woman coming up in politics, because these spaces are not made for us, right? We have to push our way into this space. And so mentorship allows us to pull the next person, the next generation of leaders into this space. And mentorship allows for that to happen, and certainly networking. So I think run, use your lived experiences, because that's what qualifies you. The rest, Emily's List can teach you, APEX can teach you. Definitely those things can be learned. And then help a woman run who's in your community. And lastly, always look for mentorship and seek that.
That's really great. I mean, I think it's important to find your support network, like you said, and just looking for people who can help you, not only people who have the resources, but who can be your voice as part of your platform. So kind of like backtracking a little bit, are there certain things that you recommend for candidates? Like if you could pick 3 things, whether it's like reflecting on yourself for certain qualities, like are there 3 key advice that you would give to anyone who's thinking about running for office?
Yeah, I think, the big one is, why do you want to run? This is a question you're going to get asked, even if when you are starting to run. That's the number one question. It's going to get very old, but you're going to get very good at answering it. So part of the pre-work that we tell women to do is, really sit down and think about, what do I want to run? Why do I want to run? What do I offer voters? It's, one of the things is that of course, when you're running for office, there's a passion, there is an issue perhaps that you want to champion, but those issues may not necessarily be issues that the community or the constituency that you're going to represent is in alignment with, right? And so you want to learn about what is happening in your community. What other things does your community need? where there are deficiencies, where perhaps you can build coalitions with other communities to get something done. And then, the big one is also, do you have the discipline and the drive to win? Oftentimes, again, this is not a question of, do you know how to campaign? We're not asking that. You need the will and the drive to be able to organize voters, to be able to get on the phone and ask for money, to be able to learn about, what are some of the issues in the community. And so it's important to be prepared of what time is going to take and commitment from you to be able to run a successful campaign. And so I think it is for those three things. Be very clear about why you want to run. What do you offer voters, right? So again, thinking about doing a listening tour in your community, meeting with other constituents in your community, building your network. And then the big thing is really, is this the right time for you? And do you have the discipline and the drive to win? And at Emily's List, we do have a training that goes more extensively into these topics. We have breakout groups. There's different things that we do with candidates. We actually have a training center that provides even toolkits on questions that you need to start asking yourself to be able to prepare yourself to run. And I'll include all of that in the chat at the end of my conversation today.
Yeah, that'll be great. Yeah, I think there's so many questions that you need to ask yourself, and really, it's a great way for you to, have a better understanding of yourself too, and just, and you have to be ready. You're right. Like, you have to be 100% ready to go, and it's the right time. So I kind of want to go back to like the campaign strategy. You mentioned it a little bit that, Emily's List can be a resource, but, also just looking out for other, campaigns that you can kind of like adapt or like, learn some similarities that you can take from. But I wanted to ask, like, how would you advise, first generation or, immigrant candidates who are running for, on their campaign strategy? And a lot of the questions that we get are, like, I'm a first generation and I don't feel that my constituent or my home state would not have the support, or, like, it does not reflect necessarily on my background. So, and so I think a lot of people have that hesitancy, and they may be ready to run, right? Like, they may feel that this is the right time for me to run for office, but my constituency does not necessarily reflect on my background. So I see a lot of the hesitancy there. So do you have any advice on, how to strategize their campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is that your personal story and your personal narrative is so key to conveying not just who you are, but more importantly, your values. And it's those values that are very universal, right? The value of hard work, the value of giving back to your community, a sense of responsibility. These are things that connect you to others that may not have the same experience as you. And so there's a lot of power in that personal story. So I think that this is where, again, and you also want to think about why it is that you want to run and how does that connect to the personal story. So for someone like me, for example, I saw my mom, who is a housekeeper and was a housekeeper for many, many years. There were not, her stories were not being told, right? Her experiences were missing. But more importantly, there were policy issues at the table that did not cover many women who were doing domestic work, many of whom are AAPI, Latina, and more importantly, immigrants. And so that was a passion for me of making sure that those voices were elevated. And while a lot of folks were not able to directly connect with my experience, it was important for me to convey the importance of, equal pay, right? These are universal things. The importance of accessibility to healthcare, to accessibility to, potentially a 401k, right? Savings. So these are, again, things that, yes, they may come from your unique experience, but you can connect them to your universal issues within your community. And so don't shy away from the fact that, that your experience may feel like it's just your own. You're going to find that a lot of people will relate to, again, you wanting to be here in this country and give back and participate in it. So I think start there. And again, have conversations with people in your community. This is where it's very vital for you to get out of your, community or your comfort zone, so to speak, and start building coalitions and start having conversations with others around what do you care about, and go on a listening tour, right? As much as this is about you running for office, it's really about what voters care about and what your community cares about. So go on a listening tour, get a sense of where folks are, and incorporate that into your own message. How powerful is it for you to say, I've had a conversation with 1,000 people in the district, and they are all saying the same thing that I'm saying, and that is that we all want a better community so that we can all send our kids to higher education. We could all invest in so we could become homeowners. So I think it's important for you to go, again, the listening tour, understanding what others care about, and then your personal narrative. And I would not shy away from your immigrant experience. I think if anything, it is extremely unique, but more and more we're seeing that this is an experience that others have in the community as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's so important to, just be yourself. I think that's a pretty good, lesson we can learn from, especially a lot of the candidates who have recently ran and got elected or who are currently running. I think it's so great that a lot of them are embracing who they are, just shying away from, what's acceptable, right? There's no right or wrong answers for these. So I think it's so important that you do your research. And part of that is, engaging with your constituents. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about, being a public figure. That obviously has a very, complicated notion. And I think it's difficult it may be intimidating, right? So, just knowing like what to say and what not to say, how to stick to your talking points and things like that. So can you talk a little bit more about, how you would recommend candidates on how to tackle this? And because a lot of it may be like case by case, or it may be, depending on the venue or who you're talking to. So what are some general advice that you would give for candidates on being a public figure?
Yeah, I think that, I would say the first thing is that sometimes the line between private and public is very blurred, and it's important for you right in the beginning to really separate them, right? So even practical things like if you decide to run for office, separate your personal social media and do a social media that's just for you as a candidate. And, your personal media is just for your friends. It is, pretty much on lock. And the pages that you have for social media are public pages that allow you to communicate, allow you to, inform and announce. I do think that oftentimes one of the pre-work that we have women do is to put themselves under a microscope, so to speak. So really look at what are the things that you think might come up that might be an issue for you. And this is all about being, in front of it and not reacting to it and preparing for it, right? So let's just say you maybe didn't vote for 3 years. You obviously can't go back and vote, but you have to be prepared if that does come up, that you explain why that happened, right? Certainly, if you have if you've had tax issues, again, many people have. There's a lot of folks that are struggling right now. So being able to speak to why that is, and potentially, you could fix some of these things. It's really about integrity at the end of the day, that certainly things have happened in the past, but you have made an inroad to fixing them. I think that the other thing is, yes, you have to have thick skin, but you should also know that you need to have a community around you that supports you, other validators in the community that support you. so that you are not just the one that's, you know, speaking up for yourself, but there's others in the community that can say, you know, Johanna has done this work. I've known her. She has been results oriented. I am excited for her candidacy, and this is why I'm supporting her. And so certainly having those validators there is key. And I think the big thing is, you know, again, you could always pivot. You have the power to decide what you're going to answer and what you're not going to answer. And so it's important to always go back to your campaign message. Always go back to the reason why you're running. Those are, you know, that's your core message. And so it's essential that you lean on that, and that you decide what it is that you want to, you know, that you're going to address what you're going to need to address. But I think those are just some tactical things that you could start doing to separate both of the personal and the public.
Great, thank you so much. So our other speaker joined. So Dr. Sayu Bhojwani, if you want to share your video with us. So I just want to quickly introduce our next speaker, Dr. Sayu Bhojwani. She's the founder of Women's Democracy Lab and New American Leaders. She's a great, you know, leader in civic engagement and a strong advocate for women's rights. So I just wanted to ask if you can briefly introduce yourself and your current work.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry that I'm both late and super scattered because as I explained to Heejin, I had a COVID scare and now I'm locked out of my apartment. So things are going really well. Although I did test negative for the rapid test, so we'll see what happens. But I'm actually in transition from an organization 10 years ago and ran for 10 years called New American Leaders, which trained first and second generation Americans to run for public office. And I'm in the process of launching a new organization called Women's Democracy Lab, which is going to support Indigenous women and women of color as they serve in office. Because as many of you may be aware, the pipeline work at the early stages of recruiting and supporting women to run has become quite robust over the years. But you know, once people get into office, there's very little support to ensure that they feel that they have the capacity and the resources that they need to be successful. So, and I'm calling in from New York City.
Great, thank you so much. So, so Johanna and I talked about, you know, what it's like to, you know, run as a woman and, you know, as a first generation woman, and particularly for APIs. And Johanna gave really great insights and advice on really for anyone who's thinking about their candidacy, who's thinking about launching their campaigns, and really highlighting the need for looking for support, especially for fellow women who are running, or just a support network, and really reflecting on yourself and evaluating whether you're ready and how you can run successful campaigns. So I just want to go back to that a little bit and hear what you have for API women who are thinking about running, especially you know, for first generation women who are thinking about launching their campaigns.
Sure. So, and I'm sorry if this will be repetitive since I didn't hear what Johanna had to say, but I'll sort of focus on three things. One is how urgent the need is for more of us to be in office. And so if you're on the fence, but interested in running, I think that the reality is that it will make it not only will you be in a position to change policy, but you'll also be in a position to support some of the more progressive leaders who are often being outnumbered by less progressive folks and by folks who don't really understand the needs of our communities. So that's one thing, right, about the need for us to be there in large numbers in order for the system and the policy to actually change. The second, and this is borrowing on or kind of responding to a question that I saw in the background materials, you said that, you know, someone asked this question about what is it, what to consider if your constituents don't look like you. And So if there's any, I mean, I think for me, the point is like Asian American women can represent any constituency in America, just the way that white men can represent any constituency in America. Like we don't often think about, when I say we, I mean we as a country generally. When a white man is running for office, or a white woman for that matter, we don't think, well, does the district look like them? We have an assumption of who can be a leader. And I think that it's important to recognize that we should be seen as leaders of any district in America and not be, limited by the way that the constituency looks. At the same time, I do think it's important that you have credibility and a track record within the community. And I think that we don't want to overstate the track record. Like you don't have to have lived in a place for decades or been born in the place in order to have a track record, right? Like you can have a record within the community through whatever community work that you've done, even if you've only been living there for a year or two. And then thirdly, I would say that, and maybe you all have talked about money and finances and how important that is, that it's very difficult for communities of color and people of color to have the kind of savings and financial networks that frankly that white men have. But at the same time, and so we'll never be completely financially secure. But at the same time, I think being very realistic about what you're going to need to support yourself, either through money or people resources, getting support for childcare, getting support for, meal, all the things that make life somewhat more easy when you're on the campaign trail. But then also, as many of you may know, even if you do get elected, do not pay. And so really trying to think through what the implications are going to be for you if you have to quit your full-time job in order to be what is considered a part-time, be a legislator that's considered part-time, but actually requires full-time commitment. So I think we often stop thinking about money past the point of fundraising for campaigns, but there is some financial planning that I think has to occur even if you do win the election, depending on what race you're running for. So those are the 3 points I want to start with, and I'll pause there.
Yeah, no, I think those are really great points. And we actually did not talk about financing. And I think it is a really important point to, think about both campaign financing and personal planning for your finances, because, it is a lot of, opportunity cost lost when you're quitting your job to run a campaign. I mean, it takes a really long time to even launch it. And then, running it full cycle, it's a lot of commitment. So Johanna, I would love to hear your thoughts on, how to manage fundraising to, personal, managing personal finances.
Yes, no, absolutely. And we actually just added, I know I said I was going to add our information. So our training center actually has a finance training on how to raise money, and certainly low dollar, digital, recognizing that, yes, to Sayu's point, there are a lot of barriers oftentimes for women of color to run. But I think for us is we don't start from a place of deficiency. We start from a place of where there's opportunity, and then providing you with the skills that you're going to need to be able to raise the funds. And so I really would strongly encourage you. All of these resources are free. There's trainings that you can log on to, and I will actually add a finance training on here. But I think the big thing is that one of the things that we tell women is that, your personal network is really key for you to be able to start raising the funds, right? But this is where the pre-work is important. As Sayu mentioned, it depends on which race you want to run. If you want to run for federal office, obviously that's going to require a lot more money to raise versus you running for, let's say, city council or a school board race, but doing the homework of who has run in the past, how much have they raised, is important to give you a sense of how much you're going to need to raise. And the big thing here is that, you're raising money from your friends, you're raising money from in low dollars. And the earlier that you start, the more time that you have to be able to raise the funds that you need. I think, but again, the big thing here is that there is support to teach you how to be able to raise the money. And I would not put that as a barrier of, well, I don't know, rich folks. Most of us don't know rich folks. And the reality is that, yeah, you're going to get capped out in some of these races. In some races, you're going to have to raise money, and the maximum is going to be $250 or $100, right? And in some places, it's unlimited. So it's important, though, for you to be able to do the pre-homework and get a sense of how much you're going to raise. Because oftentimes we think it's in the thousands, the 100,000s, but it could just be that for $20,000, you and throughout a year, you need to raise the money to be able to mount the campaign. But I'm going to put in our finance training on here so that this is helpful for all of you as well to log on to.
Great, thank you so much. So now I'm going to open it up for audience Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, you can raise your hand or you can put your questions in the chat box.